Hi, in this video we'll be covering distance and midpoint. Our objectives are to use coordinate geometry to determine the length of segments. That means we're going to learn the distance formula. We will use coordinate geometry to find the midpoint of a finite segment given two endpoints. And we will use coordinate geometry to find the missing endpoint given the endpoint and exactly one of the endpoints. So the distance formula the distance between 2 points is the length of the segment that connects the 2 points. If 2 points don't make a horizontal or vertical line, they imply a right triangle. And we know previously that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The Pythagorean theorem is associated with right triangles. So we're going to connect the Pythagorean theorem and the distance formula. In this example, we have a point that has coordinates of 1, 1, and another point that has coordinates of 27. So we're going to say that B has coordinates x1 and y1, and A has coordinates x2 and y2. So we remember the Pythagorean theorem would tell you that this side could be A. So we have A, and we have this side to be B. And the hypotenuse is C. So when we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we're talking about the two legs of a right triangle and the hypotenuse. Now notice that in the distance formula, we have two things that are squared. We have x2 minus x1 squared and y2 minus y1 squared. Well, this a value is really just x2 minus x1. That would be 19. So we would have, if we're doing the Pythagorean theorem, we would have 19 squared plus, and the b value is just y2 minus y1. So that's going to be 7 minus 1, which is 6. So 19 squared plus 6 squared equals whatever it equals. And c squared is going to be whatever we get from doing a squared plus b squared. So 19 squared, I believe, is 381, and 6 squared is 36. So we add this together, we get 417 equals c squared. I'm sorry, 19 squared is 361. 361. So that's going to change to 397. So if we wanted to solve for c, we can take the square root of both sides, and we would get c equals the square root of 397. And the square root of 397 is 19.92. It's the distance from point B to point A. So the distance formula is really the Pythagorean theorem switched around, where we have this is going to be our a squared, this is going to be our c squared, and c is that. So we know that c equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. Now, if you don't want to remember any of that, you can just remember this formula: d equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Make sure you label your points. So some notation first. Segment AB with the line over it means segment AB. It means a segment that has endpoints AB. And AB without a bar refers to the length of the segment AB. So when we see AB equals 7, that's going to mean that the length of a segment with endpoints A and B is 7 units long. So for our first example, we have a segment is formed by endpoints P, and that should be a Q. Let's make that a Q. So P and Q, if P equals 4, 6, and Q equals 11, 13, what is PQ? So we're going to use the distance formula. I highly encourage you to label your points. So we have x1, y1, x2, and y2. So remember, our distance formula is d equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So for this, we're going to get d equals the square root of x2 is 11, x1 is 4. We're going to square that, plus then 13 minus 6. So 13 minus 6, because that's y2 minus y1 squared. And that's going to give us 7 squared, the square root of 7 squared plus, oh, conveniently 7 squared. So that's going to be the square root of 98. I don't have my calculator available, so let's use the one on the, how do I get to my calculator? Give me a moment. So we'll have to put it in the calculator. We'll open this, and we want to do the square root, of 98. So that's going to be 9.9. So we'll go back. And so the square root of 98 is 9.9. All right. So you can leave your answer as the square root or the decimal. I would say always round to 2 decimal places. For example 2, you're going to try this one. We have endpoints R and Q. I'll pause the video and see what you get. All right. So if you did this without me, you may have gotten D equals the square root of, let's label our points. We have x1, y1, x2, and y2. So x2 is -3. So -3 minus 8 squared plus y2 minus y1 is going to be 7 minus -4 squared. Right, sorry about the bad parentheses. So when we square this, we're going to get, so that's going to be -11 squared plus +11 squared. So that's going to be the square root of 242, which equals probably like 15 point something. So we're going to have the square root of 242. Square root 242 is 15.56, rounding to 2 decimal places, is 15.56. All right. And so then now we're moving on to midpoint. So the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So if I have a point, let's make up a coordinate. We're going to call this point A. And so we see that A has coordinates -2, +2. Remember, x comes first. And then let's make up another coordinate B. We'll give B the coordinates of 6, 8. So B has the coordinates of 6 and 8. So let's see if I can draw a line that connects these 2 points. All right. So the midpoint is x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So in this case, that would be -2 plus 6 divided by 2, comma 2 plus 8 divided by 2. And we can simplify that stuff. -2 plus 6 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 plus 8 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So our midpoint is 2, 5. Let's get a different color. So our midpoint is over 2, up 5. Like basically right here is where we're going to put that midpoint. So we can see that if we travel horizontally, the distance that we travel horizontally and then up is going to be the same from A to M as it is from M to B. These 2 triangles that we get here and here are equal to each other. All right. So example 1, segment AB has endpoints 3, 4, and B has endpoint 7, 8, and we need to find the midpoint M. If it helps, you can graph this. So we go over 3 and up 4. 4 point A, and then for point B, we go over 7 and up 8. That's going to be right here. Call that point B. And we want to find the midpoint of that segment. All right, so now if we're using the midpoint formula, we would get 3 plus 7 divided by 2. I'm sorry, label your points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. So 3 plus 7 divided by 2 and 4 plus 8 divided by 2. So that's going to be 5 and 6. So we go over 5 and up 6. We see that the midpoint is going to be right there. So again, we can see that if we drew a triangle that connects, so if we go over 2 and up 2, we get to M. If we go over 2 more and up 2 more, we get to B. So we go over 1, 2, and up 1, 2. We're traveling the same distance horizontally and vertically to go from point A to point M as we do to go from point M to point B. So for example, 2, you try. You can graph, do the formula, however you need to get there. All right, so you should have come up with the midpoint is going to be, label our points. So x1, y1, x2, y2. So we're going to have -7 plus 2 divided by 2, comma, -2 plus 5 divided by 2. That's going to give us -7 plus 2 is -5. So we have -5 halves, and -2 plus 5 is 3. So that's going to give us 3 halves. So we end up with a midpoint of -2.5. So -2.5 is going to be right here. So -2.5, 1.5 is about right there. And if we plot our points, we have -7, -2. That's going to be point E. And then when we have point F, we're going to have, F is 2, 5. So over 2, up 5. And you can see that if we move over horizontally and then go up vertically, that we basically are moving the same distance horizontally and vertically to go from E to M as we do from M to F. All right, so now if we have a missing endpoint, so say we know that for AC, B is the midpoint of that segment. And we know that A has coordinates -1, -2. So point A is right there. And then we know that B, which is the midpoint, has coordinates of 3, 2. So B is right here. So now what we're saying is that we have a segment where we have A and we have C as the endpoints. And we know that B is in the middle. So now in this case, A comes before B. So we know that C should be somewhere to the right of point B. So one way to find the other endpoint is to use the fact that we have a graph to get there. So to get from point A to point B, you go over 1, 2, 3, 4, and you go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means that C has to be 4 more to the right and 4 up. So we can go over 1, 2, 3, 4, because again, we went 4 this way and then we went up 4 as well. So we go over 4 and then we go up 1, 2, 3, 4. And so point C has to be right where we stopped, and that's going to be a coordinate of 7, 6. So now if we go back over here and check, so now C has coordinates of 7 and 6. So if we did our midpoint formula, we would have -1 plus 7 divided by 2, and A had coordinates of -2. So then -2 plus 6 divided by 2. I don't need those parentheses. So -1 plus 7 is 6 divided by 2 is 3. -2 plus 6 is 4 divided by 2 is 2. You see that we get the midpoint that we were given by doing this. So one way is to move horizontally and vertically to get to our midpoint. We'll talk about how we do it algebraically after you try to do the same thing. So you graph and see if you can find the missing endpoint E if F has a coordinate of 2, 3. So F is 2, 3. So that's point F. And point G is 9, -1. So that's right here. And so we need to find the other endpoint, E. So E is going to be somewhere to the left of F, but I'll let you figure the rest of that out. All right, so if you paused and came back, you should have gotten to go from G. So we're going to go backwards to G to F. So we're going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we went to the left 7. And then we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So we went up 4. So up 4 units. So that means we need to go 7 more to the left and 4 more up to get to E. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we go left 7 more. Then we're going to go up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we went up 4. And that's going to give us point E. So we'll put point E right here. And so we look at those coordinates. E has a coordinate of -7, +7. I'm sorry, not -7. That's a -5. -5, +7. Okay, so if we're doing it that, so we can go back and check using our midpoint formula. So E and G are the points, the endpoints. So we would have -5 plus 9 divided by 2. And the y coordinate for E is 7. The y coordinate for G is -1. And divide those by 2. So that's a -1, not -7. It looks like a 1. So -5 plus 9 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 7 plus -1 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So again, you see that we actually get the midpoint once we check our work. All right, so now in addition to using a graph, we can also just use algebra to get our answer. So remember, the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and the y coordinate is y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So if I tell you that I think we're going to work the same problems from the previous 2 slides. So, but we're going to use algebra to get there. So in this case, we have -1 and 3. So B is the midpoint. And so we know that the x coordinate for the midpoint, 3, that should equal x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So we're going to say this point is x1 and that point is y1. So we're going to have -1 plus, we're trying to find the other endpoint. So that's going to be x2 that we don't know. And that divided by 2. So the x coordinate for the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So we want to solve for x2. To do that, our next step needs to be to multiply by 2. So we're going to have 3 times 2 equals -1 plus x2. So we know 3 times 2 is actually 6. So that's 6. So then we need to add 1 to both sides. So we get +1 plus 1. So 6 plus 1 is 7. So we get 7 equals x2. To find the y coordinate, we're going to do exactly the same thing. The y coordinate for the midpoint is 2. So 2 is going to equal this. So 2 is going to equal y1, which is -2 plus y2, and all of that is divided by 2. So the next step is we multiply by 2. So 2 times 2 is equal to -2 plus y2. So that's going to be 4 equals -2 plus y2. And then you add 2 to both sides and you get 6 equals y2. So our, did I put that in right? Yeah, so our midpoint is 7. I mean, the other endpoint was 7, 6. So that should be, yeah, so 7, 6. All right. So if you want to verify this, again, you can use A and C and see if you get point B as your midpoint. All right, so now you try this algebraically. Okay, so if you pause the video and came back, you should have gotten, so F is the midpoint. So we know that the x coordinate, which is 5, should equal the x coordinate, so that should equal x1. So x1 plus x2 divided by 2. Our next step is going to be to multiply by 2. So we have 2 times 5 is 10. So 10 equals 12 plus x2. And then we subtract 12 from both sides. And we get negative 2 equals x2. We're going to do the same thing for the y-coordinate. The y-coordinate for the midpoint is 6. So 6 is going to equal negative 8 plus y2 all divided by 2. Next step is to multiply both sides by 2. So we get 12 equals negative 8 plus y2. And then we add 8 to both sides to get rid of the negative 8. And so we get 20 equals y2. So our coordinate is negative 2, positive 20 for point E. You should go back and check E and G to see if you get the midpoint of F. So 12 plus negative 2 divided by 2 and negative 8 plus 20 divided by 2. 12 minus 2 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Negative 8 plus 20 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. We get that we get that midpoint. So that means our endpoint is correct. All right, so that's going to conclude our video on distance and midpoint. A recap is the distance formula is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared under the square root. When you see the words how far or length and you have coordinates, that's a good indicator that you need to use the distance formula. We have our midpoint formula, and the new notation that we learned is when you see 2 letters with a bar above them, it means a segment that has those 2 letters as endpoints. And if you see those 2 letters without the bar, it means that that is the length of the segment. Thank you.